Hello, guys. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm joined by Jonny from Roker Report. Jonny, how are you doing? I presume you're a much happier bunny than I am after that first leg.
Yeah. It's been a nice few days in the world of Sunderland AFC for a change. Positive results. Looking forward to the second leg. Got me ticket sorted. Realised that I'd booked the wrong train earlier today, so I had to shell out another 20 quid on a replacement train to actually be able to get there on time. But that little mishap to one side. Yeah, it's quite a nice place to be, but. Ask us again tomorrow morning. I'll probably be a horrific pit of nerves yet again. So
I
just
know,
enjoying
I
the calm
know.
before the storm now.
Absolutely. Everyone listening, by the way, get your comments and thoughts in down below. We'll answer a few of them and get them shown on screen as well. Make sure you like and subscribe while you're down there. Let's do a quick reflection on that first leg, Jonny, because I think Sunderland just nailed it. The whole game plan absolutely nailed us, and obviously the late winner was an absolute bonus.
Yeah, like you said, the late winner there was a massive bonus for us. But even without that, I think certainly Regis Lebris, I think, sort of won the tactical battle early on because, I don't think many people, if any, would have seen us lining up with the two strikers again. Um, Speaking in the build up to the game, myself and I think every other Sunderland fan that I listen to, we were all expecting to see the 4-3-3 formation again. So it was a bold call. It was a brave decision, I think, to go away from home and to a place that you've struggled at so much down the years, and to whack that two striker setup out, kind of out of nowhere again. But I think what really impressed us the most was that yes, we played with two up front, which on paper it's a more attacking setup, but I thought the way we defended was superb throughout. And again, a lot of credit's got to go to Lebris for that, for the organisation and the discipline, but also to the players. As much as Lebris is getting a lot of plaudits, and I think deservedly so, it's not him who has to make those last ditch tackles and win the ball in the air. And I mean, I think Dan Ballard made 20 clearances or something through the 90 minutes. So, full credit's got to go to each and every one of the players. But yeah, I thought we did get it spot on in terms of the setup. Mind you, I mean, we rode our luck at times. You don't have a defender make 20 clearances if you're not under sustained periods of pressure without the ball. But yeah, I think that was how we had to play the game, and to see the game plan come off like it did was obviously brilliant from our point of view.
I think it ended like 75-25 in terms of possession percentage, and it was clearly a tactic of yours to let our centre backs have the ball, and we didn't do too much with it. Obviously, Ballard was immense. I was getting really sick of him by the end of the game, just clearing absolutely everything. Is that something you've particularly seen before from Sunderland this season? That way they've sat off and defended like that?
I don't think we've seen it to that extent, but it has been a feature of our play at times this season because, I mean, if you think back to the early season, we tended to be a lot higher up the pitch and we tended to be a lot more aggressive, both on and off the ball. But then, as we kind of slowly transitioned into being more of a counter-attacking outfit as the season wore on, it has been something that I wouldn't say we've used it as a crutch or anything, being able to defend like that, but it's certainly been something that allows us to set up with quite a deep defensive line and then be able to try and, draw the opposition on and then make maximum use of the space in behind. So, like I say, I've certainly not seen an individual performance like that from Ballard all season. But yeah, it has been something that I think we've shown that we've had it there in the locker for when we've needed it. Because we've not been a team who's dominated possession massively through the season. So it's always been there. It's just, we weren't quite as extreme with it in the weeks leading up to this game.
The way we came back instantly in that first leg, that Rodoni goal, and the crowd was up, just made me feel like we were going to go on and get that goal that it felt like we needed to take a lead back to the Stadium of Light. So for then a mistake from our end, it felt like almost, I don't know, I think I've said this before, but a statistical draw in terms of the XG, in terms of everything we saw on the day. Both teams were really quite even, I thought. And then obviously the Milan Van Avak error has put us on the back foot here. We've got a comment from Gab Sutton as well. Put that up on screen. Mundell back for tomorrow night. Big plus for Sunderland. I think, don't know who's a big Sunderland fan actually, Gab Sutton or you here, Jonny. Bringing him off the bench, perhaps moving Lafay into the 10 could be a nice move for them to regain control in the second half if they need to. very good point. And I guess we should look forward as well to the second leg now. Is it difficult to see Lebris doing what he did in the first leg and sitting off and playing a 4-4-2 compact, given you're going to be in front of 40 odd thousand Sunderland fans?
Yeah, I expect us to, whether we line up differently in terms of the personnel, I certainly expect us to play a lot differently. That first kind of 15-20 minute opening period is going to be crucial because, like you say, it's going to be a massive crowd. I think, today, this afternoon, the game sold out. So, should be, I think it's something like 46,500 fans will be in.
Could have given us a few hundred more tickets.
Hey,
2,500 or whatever.
I'm not getting into politics of that. I'll leave that one to the bean counters. But yeah, look, it's going to be, hopefully it's going to be a great atmosphere. I think there's some stuff planned for before the game. Some, T4s or whatever you call them will be surrounding the pitch in the stands, some kind of coloured card displays and stuff. There's talk of being a bit of a kind of welcoming party for the team bus and things. So you'd expect that the place will be, if not rocking, then certainly, simmering and ready to blow by kickoff. So we've got to capitalise on that. And I think it's a double-edged sword because it could be massive for us. If we're able to start on the front foot and get a goal early, then, light the blue touch paper and away we go, because the crowd they will be rocking if that happens. But it could be your route back into the tie, I think, because, Regis Lebris in his press conference today was, he specifically said, we're not going to set out to defend. We want to get a goal. We want to try and win the game as well as the tie. So if we, get that a little bit wrong, maybe commit too many men forward at the wrong time, and you're then able to capitalise and get a goal, obviously that would be a massive kick in the teeth for us. And, it's not that I wouldn't expect the crowd to turn, but I would certainly expect them to be very muted in comparison to what you could have if we take an early lead. So, yeah, that's going to be a key period for both teams. And I think it's something Frank Lampard will need to, he'll need to be operating at his absolute best to set his team up in a way to take full advantage of that, because for me, that's where the tie and the game are going to be won or lost.
Completely agree with that. Claire's asked a question here as well in terms of the same tactics. Do you think it'll be that 4-4-2 again, or as Gab said, do you think it could be Lefay in midfield? Don't know if Mundell's fit enough to start, but another option maybe Watson on the left. I mean, you've got an amazing squad. I mean, look at the subs you bought on. This is what caught my eye. I was like, they're bringing Chris Rigg and Alan Brown off the bench. How do we compete with that? So you've got options.
Yeah, so I would not be surprised either way, to be honest. I think if this was another world where the first leg was a draw or a slight, we were taking a 1-goal deficit, I think we'd see Romain Mundell possibly rushed in that little bit quicker and start the game, because I imagine he's probably fit enough to if he absolutely had to. But because we're in a position where we are up by a goal, I don't think he'll risk him, because, look, you don't want to start having half an eye on the final before you've actually got through the semi-final. I mean, either team could very easily go through from this point. But with that in the very back of your mind, you're thinking, do we risk Mundell now and potentially lose him for the final and pre-season and, potentially into the start of next season?
There's a situation with Mundell as well that you could score 2 goals in the first 20 minutes and the tie could be over and you wouldn't even need to bring him on. That's a scenario that could happen as well.
Well, exactly. And I think because Mundell isn't fully fit and certainly he's not unequivocally ready to start, that's why I think we probably will see the same 4-4-2, because, look, Tommy Watson's a talented player, but there's been a very bitter taste left in the mouth with some of the things that have gone on with his transfer to Brighton being agreed and announced and stuff. So I wouldn't expect to see him start. And because of that, I think you almost run out of options on the left wing. So, yeah, without Mundell being fit, to be able to push Lefay centrally, I'd probably expect the 4-4-2, but I also wouldn't be shocked to see us change back to that sort of 4-3-3, 4-5-1 type shape, because, ultimately your midfield is one of the best kind of areas of that team that you've got some excellent players in, and Radoni's already shown how good he is by scoring in the first leg. So if you're looking at trying to get a bit of extra midfield dominance and stability, then, I don't hate the idea of returning to that 3, but yeah, in the absence of any major surprises, I'd expect 4-4-2 again, with maybe you change one name if there's one or two players have pulled up with tight hamstrings and stuff after the first leg, but don't be surprised seeing unchanged team.
I think it's really interesting that you mentioned Rodoni there because it was one of his quietest games for us, and I think that's massive credit to Bellingham and Neil for and the strikers for preventing the balls coming into that area. He didn't really get hold of the ball. He didn't really run at your defenders. He did score, and that's what we like to see him doing, running into the box. And obviously, we cross the ball loads and we head the ball loads. It's our tactic under Lampard. But I don't know if almost switching to a three might mean he's got a more of a one-on-one situation rather than kind of a team job on him. So I think it could benefit you to kind of leave it how it was. It works so well that it's very difficult to see as being able to break you down differently than how we were trying to in that first leg.
Yeah, and this is, I think, again, where that kind of managerial battle is going to really be interesting, because I think, Labrie brings the surprise in the first leg and names the two up front, and obviously that ended up paying off. But I think now, obviously, you've lost the first game, so you're going to be looking for a reaction, obviously. I'm sure the players will all be itching to go out there and try and put it right. But I think Lampard as well, I think he'll be a lot more tempted to do something different, to give us something different to think about and try and challenge us in different ways than he would have been if it was level or you were in the lead. So I think that's where, if there's any area where we can be hurt by your team selection and tactics, I think it's if you, let's say we do stay with the 4-4-2, but then all of a sudden you've picked a different system, then it could possibly leave us slightly scrabbling to keep up in that first, like I say, that crucial 15-20 minute opening period. So I'll be really interested to see the lineups when they come out, tomorrow night before the game, and when we actually see the teams take that first lineup on the pitch, ready for kickoff, and you see them in the shape. I think that'll be really important to determine how the start of that game goes. Because like I said, Lampard, he has every opportunity to surprise us and cause us some problems.
Yeah, absolutely. He doesn't seem like he's got too many other options. And I think in his pre-match presses, he's like, we played quite well. We just needed to tidy up a few things. So I'm not sure he's going to spring anything too mad. I think the one option is maybe we have to take a risk, unlike you, on Mason Clark starting on the left wing. And we need to get the striker situation right. I mean, all the Cov fans, myself included, were staggered to see not Sims not start, but the fact he wasn't even thrown on at any point during that game when we were chasing a goal. And we've been critical of him and his goal output and his effort, but Hadji Wright wasn't performing, one of his worst games again for us. And Lampard didn't want to throw on a player who could have scored against his former club or at least caused your centre backs another problem. Are you wary of Ellis Sims at all? Can I say that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Again, like, not to be too woe is Sunderland, but ex-players always seem to score against us, which, if we're being honest, is probably just because we've got that many ex-players playing in the Football League that it's just a matter of probability. But it would certainly, I'd be more worried than not if I saw Sims on the pitch at any point, because I would just know in the back of my mind, like, it's a classic narrative, isn't it? Comes back, bites the hand that used to feed and everything like that. So, yeah, and also I think you're right to point out it was a bit strange not to see him come on at any point in the first leg, because even just, I think, once it became obvious that Sunderland were pretty comfortable defending the way that we were in that first leg, sometimes it's just to have a bit of a point of difference, bodies in different areas of the pitch. If you've got one up front versus two, then it changes how many centre-backs are kind of occupied at any one time by sort of their man that they're marking. So I did think it was a bit weird not to, even just to try and introduce a bit of controlled chaos just by sticking more bodies up there that are also targets to hit in the air. I mean, you can debate Sims's particular abilities in the air. I'm sure there's some Coventry fans who might, not think he's that much of anything for us to worry about in that department. But yeah, I think sometimes when you're trying the same thing over and over again, you've got to at some stage you've got to roll the dice, and you touched on it before as well. Obviously it's Coventry who need to take a risk more than Sunderland in the second leg. So I think that is an area where, and I agree as well, I don't think Lampard's likely to make wholesale changes just for the sake of surprising us. But I think it's somewhere that you could definitely make more of an effort and make more difference to the game in those kind of ways with those substitutions, particularly in the second half. That's kind of a bit of an area of improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll start at the start with this comment as well. I think whoever scores first tomorrow will go to Wembley. And this game does feel massive in terms of the first goal. I mean, you've mentioned the atmosphere. I think you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think Sunderland will come out and really try and kill us with an early goal in the first 20 minutes. The crowd will be up. It's going to be a real test for us to see if we can get through that part. But if we do get to a situation where we're able to keep the ball and have 50, 60% possession, even if we don't do much with it, just to keep the ball and make the crowd a bit nervy and then try and get crosses into the box and see where we go from there. Do you agree in terms of first goal? First goal could decide it. Obviously, if we score the first goal, remember the tie is only level, but it feels pretty monumental.
Yeah, it's all about the momentum, isn't it? Like you say, even if the tie is only level if you get the first goal, it's the fact that those same old doubts will start creeping in again. You know, everyone will think back to even just the home game, you know, earlier this season. I think it was in November, wasn't it, where we were 2-0 up in the first half and seemingly cruising. And then second half, it slips away and we end up drawing the game and dropping 2 points. Those kind of demons will start to bubble up more and more to the forefront the longer it goes. I mean, even just without us scoring at all, like you say, if you can get, you know, 60 or touching 65% possession of the ball for the opening period, you're right, you don't have to do much, because it'll all of a sudden that enthusiasm and that belief, well, not so much the belief, but certainly the, you know, the energy will start to drain out of the crowd, even, you know, just subconsciously. The longer it goes without a goal, the harder it is to maintain your intensity as a player and as a supporter. You know, you can't just sit there and sing for 90 minutes. So yeah, I think it's going to be crucial, because I think if we get it, all of a sudden that's a 2-goal deficit. You've got to score twice just to be able to take it extra time. You know, the pressure ramps up massively. And if you get it, then yeah, everything's back to level. And that advantage that we worked so hard to bring back to the Stadium of Light, if that disappears, then again, it's that sort of mental battle begins internally of, you know, making sure that we can stay focused and not start to let everything creep in, those doubts and those feelings of pressure that are obviously everyone's going to feel the pressure because it's a huge game. But yeah, so long-winded way of saying I agree. I think the first goal is going to be massive. And it's not just the first goal, it's the first period, like I say, because even if you don't score, you can still damage us in the first sort of 20 minutes just by taking this thing out of the game. So yeah, it's going to be very important. I think it's going to make for an excellent game for the neutral to watch right from the start.
Yeah, it might be a bit more interesting than the Sheffield United Bristol City second leg that's on tonight. But we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see if Bristol City can do it. Maybe I'll have real belief that we can do it as well. A few more comments I'll read out here. Daniel says, "Can't see the Stadium of Light crowd just letting them sit back like they did at our place. Certainly is interesting to see how Sunderland approach it." And Paul comments, "Really hope you do open up, not open us up. That'd be awful. Open up, as that will suit us to get a quick goal." It's an interesting point. I want to kind of move on to what I'm hoping will happen in the latter stages of the game. Is even if we haven't scored, potentially it's level and we're just pushing for that goal and we're throwing everything at it. One thing I have noticed Labris does, and I think he did it on Friday as well, is he'll go to 5 at the back and kind of invite quite a lot of pressure on. I'm pretty sure he did it at the Stadium of Light when we came back from 2 goals down. I think he did it on Friday, and I'm just hoping that will give us a bit more room. And is that something that you're concerned about, or Sunderland fans have been concerned about, in the fact that he does just kind of whack on? You mentioned like Chris Metham on the bench, whack him on with 5 minutes to go and just be like, right, we'll try and see this out. Am I being too hopeful? Is this something you could see?
No. I mean, it's a good point actually. It's, you know, you're correct to identify that is something that he does, and I think he did it on Friday night. You know, I mean, we ended up getting the second goal after he'd made those changes, but obviously that was slightly more down to individual play than it was down to a team system.
Yeah.
Again, it's one of those where it can go either way. Obviously, I mean, everything in football can go either way, but I think it made sense on Friday night, because I think most of the attempts to create something from Coventry were coming from balls into the box. There was a lot of aerial, you know, an aerial bombardment almost. Again, like Ballard 20 clearances, kind of tells a whole story. So I think it made sense in the context of that game. But we have seen, and again, you're right. You know, the 2-2. That's an instance where it's backfired, and there have been games, particularly at home, and particularly against lesser teams, you know what I mean? Where it has ended up, even if we haven't conceded from it, even if we haven't dropped points, there have been noticeable drop-offs in the territory that we're able to push out into in the game, and we've seen 10-minute spells at the end of matches where we've just ceded all authority in the game to the opposition. Which, look, if your three centre halves in that lineup are Dan Ballard, Chris Mepham, and Luke O'Nien, then there's every chance they're going to be good enough to withstand whatever's thrown at them. But you lose the extra man in the midfield, or you lose the extra man from the front line. And sometimes I think we maybe lose a bit of sight of the fact that you can attack to defend. The more the ball, the more time the ball spends closer to the opposition goal and the opposition box, the less time it spends near your own box, and generally the less danger you're in. So that is something that I wouldn't say I'm worried about it, but it's definitely something that could play a part in the end of the game, because let's say it goes 0-0 or it's 1-1 or something, and so we've still got that 1-goal advantage. I think Lebris will be very, very tempted to deploy that same tactic again. And that's when, maybe, are you trusting to look a little bit too much? Because when it's a 1-goal advantage, all it takes is a dodgy deflection, or just one moment of madness from somebody, a handball, a tight offside that's missed. I know I'm talking you into the game here, but that's where I start to worry, because I think when you let the opposition have so much of a quantity of the ball in and around the box, you're starting to play with the probability and the numbers too much, and maybe you're rolling the dice a little bit too much for comfort. So, not overly worried as we sit right now, but definitely something that could be a route back into the game if it's tight late on.
It sounds silly to say, but I was the same as you, and I know you scored after he made that change. But when he made it, I was like, we've struggled to make any clear-cut chances here, and you've just given us another way to play. We don't really have to change what we're doing, and I don't know, I think he took off a striker and put on a centre back, and I just thought, yeah, I fancy this now. I'm hoping that can be the case again in the second leg. I want to talk to you about Sunderland's home playoff record, because Sunderland have a pretty bad playoff record in general. You've been in the playoffs a lot of late, but the Stadium of Light is pretty much perfect. 8 wins, 1 draw, or at least 7 wins, 1 draw. SAFC for Life says 8 wins, 1 draw. It's a brilliant record. Can we change that, or it clearly looks like a benefit for you to be playing at home here?
Well, I'd rather have that record than have the reverse of that record. I'd rather have 7 wins or 8 wins rather than losses.
About records, though.
Well, exactly.
Game.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what I was just going to say. If there's any playoff tie that can tell you that records should be ignored, it's this one so far, because if you're going off records, we should be about 4-0 down by now. We should be staring down the barrel of going out before we've even kicked the ball in the second leg. So, it's better to have that than not, like I say. It shows that we tend to do well in front of our own fans in the playoffs. And I think part of that is because games like the playoffs are where you can really make use of a big crowd. Whereas I think sometimes where the Stadium Light gets a little bit of a bad reputation, and sometimes deservedly, is in league games where there isn't like such an obvious and short-term common goal uniting everybody. Then it can get a bit trickier, because all of a sudden you've got pockets of fans start getting, a little bit disappointed with what's happening and what have you, and things can spiral. But I think in a game like a playoff semi-final, just having that tantalizing prize so close and almost in view, I think it does help to get the best out of the fan base, which I would imagine is probably at least partially why we've had such a good record. But yeah, if you're talking about games where records mean nothing, then this is definitely one of them, because otherwise, Friday would have been a very different story.
Exactly. And to offer some balance, Cov have won every playoff second leg away, although that's a very small sample size, because that's 2 for 2, I think, because we drew the first leg. We drew the first leg against Notts County and then won away. We drew the first leg at home against Middlesbrough and then won away. We've never been behind after a first leg like this, so I have to wait and see. I want to get your thoughts on this one quickly as well. Whichever team goes on to win this wins the playoffs. To make this game even bigger, other clubs will come in to pick off the other team's best players by offering them top flight football. What a prospect. How do you feel about the final, which it surely will be against Sheffield United at this point?
Well, it's a playoff final, isn't it? Crazy things can and do happen in those games with some regularity. I would expect it to be a very tough game, no matter which of us goes through. I think assuming it is Sheffield United, which, it looks like it's going to be, barring a massive turnaround tonight, I think they're a side with very, very good individual players and a lot of quality. I wonder whether they're as good as a collective as they arguably should be with the quality that they have got. Now, look, I know they've got a massive amount of points in the league, and they weren't miles off automatic promotion. But I just think every time I've watched Sheffield United this season, I just feel like I'm always wanting more. I'm always expecting something a bit better than what I see. But like I said, they're a good enough team and they've got good enough players that can often make the difference, regardless. So I would say that it'll be a hard game, but I wouldn't back against either of us if we go through, because I think, especially in a one-off game at Wembley, where there's so many other things that come into it other than just form and league position and squads and what have you. I would think that we'd be able to give them a really good game, and I would back either of us. I think I would make us slight favourites, even just because we've had to battle harder to get there. It's a shame the way that the tie's going between Sheffield United and Bristol City, just for the neutral point of view. But I do wonder whether it's going to almost be a little too easy for Sheffield United in the end. But like I said, there's so many things that go into how you perform in a big game. But to the second part of the point there, I mean, I think that's going to happen to us even if we do go up. I think there's going to be players that we struggle to keep a hold of. So God forbid what will happen if we stay down. And obviously yourselves, you've got the likes of Radoni and plenty of other players. Sheaf and Grimes are both quality players as well. You've got Van Eervak at right back. I know he made the mistake, but he's a good footballer. Bristol City, maybe not so much, even just because the players haven't got the profile. They're just not as known and not as expected to be this good. And Sheffield United, they'll struggle to keep 2 or 3 of those players, I would think, if they stay down, purely because they will get better offers from the division above. But yeah, I mean, like I say, I'm terrified of this transfer window, regardless of what happens. So I don't want to think about it anymore.
I think you're bang on in what you say about the toughness of the semi-final making a big impact. I completely agree with you. I think if Sunderland beat us tomorrow night, I would be pretty much certain to back you to win the final as well, because you'll have shown what you showed in the first leg is how you win a playoff final. And if you win the second leg as well, obviously we'll wait and see what happens. This is all what ifs, but you've shown enough now to end that losing run and go back to the side that was winning all those games earlier in the season, which could compete with Sheffield United at their best. But that's for another day, isn't it, Jonny? That's for another chat, which one of us wouldn't even be on. So let's leave that bit there. Let's go through the lineups, who we think will start. I'll start with you and Sunderland. Sorry, I can't put it across the bottom today, but we'll let Jonny do the work with the Sunderland predicted 11.
If I can speak. So easy for me to say. I expect it to be Patterson in goal, Trey Hume, Dan Ballard, Luke O'Nien, Dennis Serkin. And I'm going to say I expect the 4-4-2 again as well. So I'm going to say it'll be Patrick Roberts on the right, Dan Neil and Joe Bellingham in the middle, Enzo Lefebvre on the left, and then Eliza Mayender and Wilson Isidore through the middle is my predicted 11 for the second leg.
Unchanged then. That will be interesting indeed. I think will be the same in terms of defence and midfield as well. Midfield 3 of Sheaf, Grimes and Radoni. I think Lampard will take the risk with Mason Clark. I just have a feeling that he offers something different, and also importantly, he likes to play Hadji right down the middle. He knows he scored a hat-trick against you playing down the middle. He's our best finisher, and I don't think he fully trusts Ellis Sims or Thomas Asante, and then obviously Sakamoto on the right. So I think even if he only gets an hour out of him, he might well just chuck him in from the start and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Sakamoto was looked like a really, really good player on Friday night, by the way. I thought he caused us some problems. So, from a Sunderland point of view, I'm concerned about him. And I think if you do bring Mason Clark in on the other side, I think that's what I would do if I was Lampard. Mm-hmm. I think that would cause us the most problems out of the options you've got available.
It depends on fitness. I think if the tie was level, he might leave him on the bench for the last half an hour. I don't know if he can afford to do that at this stage of the tie with us a goal down. Sakamoto, as you say, brilliant at home, and he does have that. He's not amazing away from home. He sometimes physically gets bullied out of it a bit. He has that one trick that he does that just seems to work on every fullback, where he just chops back. He did it a couple of times against Serkin. Just works every time. It's absolutely magical to watch. We should probably come to our score predictions before we finish then, Jonny, because this is massive, isn't it? And you're in a situation where a draw could be enough. How do you think the game's going to pan out, and what's the score going to be at the end of the night?
It's a horrible one to try and call this. I think, well, I mean, as we've said a few times, I think it's going to be a very, very fast-paced start. I don't think we'll score particularly early, but I do fancy us to get the first goal, maybe towards the end of the first half. And then I think second half, I expect you to score in the game 100%. I don't think we'll keep a clean sheet, but I'm hopeful that we can also get the second goal in the second half that would, from our point of view, hopefully kill the tie off. But yeah, I think I'm going to go for 2-1 in the end, but I don't think it's not going to be plain sailing. It's going to be a very, very tough game. And yeah, I'm going 2-1, but as I'm talking, I'm getting less and less convinced. So I'm going to stop talking now and just finish with 2-1. That's what I'm saying.
That will see you off to Wembley. SAFC for life puts 1-1 Sunderland to score first. Get your score predictions in the comments below as well. Now, on the podcast this weekend after the first leg, I predicted us to lose this game 2-0. And I've changed my mind already. But I think it'll be a draw. I think it'll be a 1-1, as that comment said, or a 2-2. I can see it being a scenario where maybe you do score first and we're battling to get back into it and we nick a goal. But ultimately, you're in a position now where you don't need to win the game. So with 10 minutes to go, even if the scores are level, as you mentioned, Lebris is probably just going to sit back and try and hold what he has. I can see the last 10 minutes being quite nervy for your lot point of view as we kind of throw everything forward. But I think you might just have enough in that back line to kind of hold it out, and it'll have to be a good performance for us to get a draw. But ultimately, I don't think it'll be enough, and it feels like that mistake might decide the tie, which will be awful, to be honest. Be awful if that's the reason that you go to Wembley and we go out. Let's have a look at some of these other predictions. Lee says 2-1 normal time to Cov. Have we got that? Well, that's going to be an extra time then. I don't know if we could handle that. Oh, how would you feel about extra time and penalties, by the way? Because you've got very good squad depth. I don't know what you think of your penalty takers if we get to
that. Squad depth for extra time, totally calm, relaxed. I think we'd have enough, to be able to keep enough fresh legs on the pitch to keep going and hopefully get a goal. Penalties, though, if it goes to penalties, you may as well just book your Wembley tickets now, lads, and get your trains and hotel sorted, because we've taken 5 penalties this season and missed 4 of them, including Isidore's 2 in one game at Turf Moor when James Trafford saved both, and he put them both in the exact same spot, which I wasn't pleased at the time. No, but honestly, it's been almost laughable. If we hadn't had such a good season, like, the players would have been getting pelters for these penalties, but thankfully they've just managed to paper over those cracks in other ways. But Luke O'Nien actually took our last penalty. And we had Romain Mundle, Wilson Isidore, Joe Bellingham, Dan Neil all on the pitch, and still O'Nien took it. So yeah, if it goes to extra time, I'm going to start getting quite worried. But I think we'll be all right. If it goes to penalties, I may just leave.
Well, you've seen our penalty record in the last 2 years at Wembley. Lost a penalty shootout to Man United in the semi-final. Lost the playoff final on penalties. Very different team here. And Hadji Wright is a good penalty taker, but could be very, very nervy. I don't know if I'd take penalties right now. I think I'd probably have to say yes, absolutely, because it means we've taken you all the way. You wouldn't. Fair enough.
I mean, penalties with us, it'd be the stoppable force and the movable object meeting each other, I think, wouldn't it?
How much cash are you bunging to the Sunderland fan in our goal, though? That might be the deciding factor of it.
Just a load of Sunderland fans emptying the bank accounts around the stadium, I lied.
Paul says 1-0 to Cov, lottery extra time. And JD, who does the pod with me, says we concede far too many too easily. My heart says we'll win 2-0. Head says lose 2-1. Yeah, feels like it is in the balance. I think the kind of prospect of this game has changed massively. There's not much pressure on us now, probably have to say. We could go out with a whimper. We could surprise a few people. I always thought that home leg would be crucial. We said it on our Sportsman preview show, didn't we, Jonny, that felt like we needed to win that home leg. It hasn't happened. It's kind of over to Sunderland now to see whether you cruise your way through to Wembley or completely balls it up. I don't know if it matters much what we do. I think it might all be on Sunderland. What do you think of that?
Yeah, to be honest, I think that's a pretty fair summation of the situation, isn't it? Like, we've put ourselves in this position to have it in our own hands. But then the worrying thing about that as a Sunderland fan is we've proven quite adept over the years at chucking things away when they've been in our own hands and, making the worst out of the best possible situations. So, yeah, look, I think we've said, look, it's going to be a tight game. There's there's pressure, there's intrigue around it because of all of the narratives around our record at Coventry and Frank Lampard being in charge and Sunderland's entered the season. So, there'll be plenty of eyes on it. There'll be plenty of drama, I think, guaranteed in a game like this. And I think it's going to come down to who copes with that level of pressure and expectation the best on the night. And that's where I think we've got it in us to, drop the ball a bit, because I think such a young team, it would almost be easy to go, right, the first leg, we were like backs to the wall. We just needed to scrap through and get a result. To then actually almost get over that hump, you worry about a bit of sort of after the Lord Mayor's show kind of effect kicking in, where, potentially that's where we could let you back into the tie. But I would agree that I think this is going to be determined by how we perform and less by how Coventry perform, purely because I think, look, we all know Coventry at the best can win this game, and they can win it by 2 or more clear goals. But I worry for Lampard's adaptability. And so I think because we probably know what we're going to get, that's why I think, the ball's firmly in our court. But as I say, if there's any team that's an expert at ruining these kind of situations, it is the team in red and white. So you're never out of it.
No, I think that's bang on, really, in terms of Lampard's adaptability. This is obviously his biggest test so far. He's done very well since coming into the club. He's had a lot of injuries to deal with as well, but this is kind of, this is the position where we need to see what he's got in his locker, and I'm sure we'll throw everything at it and see what we come out with. If you're watching on Twitter, please head over to YouTube and subscribe. It will really help us out. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a like and make sure you are subscribed, because in just over 24 hours, Jonny, one of us will be off to Wembley and the other one's season will be completely dead and buried and over. Are you going to the game tomorrow, I presume you are?
Yes, I'll be at the game along with 46,499 other Mackhams, or however many the split in the crowd is. So I can't wait now. I'm absolutely buzzing. But like I say, tomorrow morning I'm going to get up and I'm going to look at my phone and realise it's match day. I think all the nerves are going to come in full force. And by, sort of 6-7 o'clock tomorrow, you would not want to be my insides.
I made the mistake last Friday of having a half day, and it just took so long. It just took so long. I was just waiting around for the game to start. Like, why have I done this? It's so nervous. One thing I do want to say before we finish, someone's commented, will the EMC song be adapted by Sunderland fans again? I thought Sunderland fans were amazing at the CBS. Genuinely, support was, I thought, really good. Good laugh as well. Obviously stole the EMC song near the end and was singing it while I was trying to get out the car park, which was very annoying indeed. But I also think Lebris did really well in terms of at the end of the game. There were clearly some celebrations, and rightly so, with the away end, but he got them off quite quickly. And it wasn't in the Chris Wilder sense where it was in, and it was a bit for show. It was more like, we've got a job to do. I don't think either fan base is getting particularly carried away at this point. Obviously, we've got an uphill task ahead. I think he's got the mentality to take you kind of to Wembley. If you had another man in charge, I would feel a bit more confident. But I think he's really impressed me in kind of the last few weeks, really, even when you've been losing games.
Yeah, and I think actually it's a really interesting point there, because generally we as Sunderland fans tend to say that we want managers who are, passionate and vibrant and exciting. And, I think of characters like Sam Allardyce when he came in. Obviously, he's very, bullish, and he's not shy of getting his opinion across. And, the scenes when he was, pulling his blazer off and dancing around with the fans when he kept us up in 2016. That's and Roy Keane's time in the last time we got promoted out the Championship. That's what people associate with a good Sunderland manager. But actually, I think Lebris's ability to temper that natural enthusiasm and energy around the club and be a calm presence and a level-headed kind of voice that's able to guide the players through. I think you're right to point out that that's going to be very important, because, again, it would be so easy to let the occasion get the better of you tomorrow and jump in for a rash challenge and end up getting a silly booking or God forbid, a sending off, early on. That would change the game hugely. So I think the fact that they've got Lebris in the corner, who's able to, like I say, just calm things down, slow things down when needed, and just, be that voice of reason in the players' ears. I think that's a massive advantage for us. And I think, I'd be more worried with a different manager as well, because I think his ability to, just be calm and analytical when he needs to be, I think, is huge.
Absolutely. And we'll see what happens tomorrow night. Big test for Labris, big test for Frank Lampard. It'll all be decided on the night at the Stadium of Light tomorrow. I can't wait for it, to be honest. It feels like not a free hit as such. It's a playoff semi-final, but the pressure was on us in the first leg, and now it seems to have evaporated. We'll see what happens tomorrow night. Jonny, thank you very much for giving up your time and your evening when the sun is shining. I hope you have a good night tonight and a terrible night tomorrow night. But thanks for joining me, mate. Make sure you like and subscribe, guys. We'll be back with some more content on YouTube and Twitter as always. But that's it for this one. Bring on tomorrow.